Hey everybody, it's Chris from Full Steam Designs. So today we're going to be building this concealment flag, and I'm building it all out of just scrap materials. Right here I'm cutting up some scrap plywood and scrap pine, the same pine that I use on the flags themselves. And really the only thing I had to buy for this was the drawer slides that we're going to use and the RFID lock module. So I'm just cutting everything to size and checking the fit of it, and I'm drilling pocket holes in each piece. What I'm doing to start this is building this outside box. So I'm using glue and pocket hole screws to hold this together. I'm just trying to be careful not to get this glue all over the place. I probably should have put something down on top of my table saw, but that's alright. I just wiped everything off. Alright, and then once I've got this all screwed together, I'm going to go ahead and cut the inside pieces that I'm going to use. And I'm actually going to cut them just a little bit under 4 inches. I think I went 3 7/8 of an inch on these. Alright, so now that we have our exterior box built, we have to figure out what the dimensions of the interior box is going to be. And to do that, we're going to take our 2 drawer slides and our 2 pieces of the top and bottom of the box and put them in, and we're just going to use a square and measure, and it looks like I'm getting about 7 3/8 of an inch. So now I'll be able to take the back edge and cut that to the proper length. I started by cutting this out to that 7 3/8 of an inch, but when I fit it up, I found that it needed to be a little bit narrower, and I think I brought it down to about 7 1/4. And all these dimensions are kind of just a rough estimate. They may be a little bit different for exactly what you're doing, but you can adjust yours accordingly. And here I'm just cutting a couple spacers that I'm going to use, and you'll see in a minute where they're going to go. Alright, so I've got the pieces of my inside box all cut to size, and what I want to do is cut a rabbet on the inside of this box, and I need it to start 3/4 of an inch from the top. But there's a little problem. This front piece, which is actually the dimensions of the outside box, but is going to be attached to the inside box, is just a little bit lower. It may be tough to tell, but it's about 1/8 of an inch lower. So I don't want that rabbet to start 3/4 of an inch from this edge. I want the rabbet on this piece to start 3/4 of an inch from this edge. So I've just got a little block that's 3/4 of an inch, and I'm just gonna line it up on this piece here, and I'm gonna mark that front piece. And now I have my mark there, and that's where the bottom of the rabbet is gonna start. I'm gonna go ahead and do that here also. Alright, so now that I've got that marked out, what I want to do is I'm going to put an insert in the back of this that's going to be made from 1/2 inch plywood, and like I said, it's going to sit down 3/4 of an inch, which was the lines that I marked around here. And to figure out the dimensions of this, I could measure everything, but what else I can do is take this dimension here, and I want the plywood to sit 1/4 of an inch into each piece around it. So I'm just going to add a 1/2 inch total to the length and width. So I'm going to take this piece here and add a 1/2 inch onto it. And then I'm going to take the length of this piece here minus the thickness of this back piece, which is about 3/4 of an inch. And then I'm going to add a 1/2 inch onto that. I know that may be confusing, but I promise you it'll make more sense as I'm doing it. So I have 7 1/4 here, I'm going to add a 1/2 inch onto that, so that's going to be 7 3/4. And then on this length here, this was 19 1/2, and we're subtracting 3/4 of an inch, so that makes it 18 3/4. But then I need to add on a 1/2 inch to for that rabbet, so that's 18 3/4 plus a 1/2 inch is going to give us 19 1/4 of an inch. For this next step, I recommend completely disconnecting power to your saw, and I'm using a sliding rule just to set my blade depth to be 1/4 of an inch, and this is what I'm going to cut my dado at. I can do this with a dado stack, and I do have one, but I kind of find that it's just quicker to. All I do is make a cut and then move my guide over about 1/8 of an inch, and just keep making them until I get that the correct width, and I just keep checking it on the plywood to make sure it's wide enough. Alright, so I've got a couple little problems here. They're not going to be a big deal, but the first one is that this front cover isn't actually sitting up against the outside of the box. And I had an idea that this was going to happen, and it's because my my drawer slides, are just a little bit too long. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put marks on here where they're hitting, and I'm just going to use my router and cut out about 1/8 inch of material to get that to sit flush. So that's not a big deal. The other problem is I'm going to be using this RFID lock, and it kind of has a big box to it that's got like the batteries and all the RFID module and everything in it. So I need to make this fit in the back, which means that this piece of material here is actually too long. I can leave these the length that they are and they can just hang over, but I'm going to need to remove a certain amount of material here just to get that to clear in the back. And I'm also going to need to notch out this piece right here so that this other piece of the lock can sit in there. So let's go ahead and get that done. Alright, I know drawer slides can look a little intimidating, but I promise setting them up is very easy. I'm just using a spacer just to kind of get it in the middle and get it evenly spaced on each side here. So this, where I'm setting this, really isn't super important. I just kind of wanted it in the middle of that piece of material. So now that I've got that set in, I'm going to go ahead and notch these pieces out. And I'm just, kind of eyeballing where everything is, drawing out a little box, and I'm just using my router just to clear some material out. And I just went about 1/8 of an inch deep. If you, get the proper length drawer slides, you won't need to worry about this. The ones I used are about 20 inch, and if you use 18 inch, you would definitely not have this problem. And I'm just drilling a couple more pocket holes here. Probably would have been a lot easier to do this beforehand, but I didn't think about it. So I got them drilled, got some glue put on there, and now I'm just screwing this together. Alright, and now to install the drawer slides on the inside box, All I'm doing is just putting my spacers in to lift the box up to the right height, and then I've got this little block supporting the front of it, and I'm just running those slides all the way out until they hit that front cover, and just screwing them in. I get as many screws as I can in, and then you just have to remove the whole box, or the inside box, from the outside box, and finish putting those slides in. So it's, like I said, it's a really easy process. Once you do one or two of these, it'll just be second nature. Now I'm installing that RFID box. It just takes 3 screws to hold it in, and I've just kind of put it in the middle of the box. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and close that inner box, put the lock in, and that'll tell me where I need to put that latch, and just putting the screws in it, and it's pretty much all set to go. And here I'm just making a French cleat. I put my table saw at about 30 degrees and just cut this piece of scrap that I had in half, and I'm going to attach one half to the box itself, and then we're going to go inside and attach the second half to the wall. I'm just putting a couple screws in that to reinforce it. Alright, it probably would have been better to make this piece over 16 inches, so I could have installed it between a couple studs, but I made this one a little shorter, so just keep that in mind when you're making yours. I've got one stud, the screw all the way to the left is going into the stud, and then I just used some drywall inserts for the other ones. And now that I've got it mounted, I'm drilling right through the box and into that French cleat, and I'm screwing it onto that, and that's going to just keep it from being able to be removed from the wall at all. Really appreciate you guys watching. I definitely appreciate a thumbs up on the video, and if you haven't already done so, subscribing to the channel and clicking on that notification bell so you'll know when I come out with some new videos. I've launched a Patreon account, so if you'd like to support me on a more personal level, I'll put a link in the description for that, and I'd appreciate it if you guys check that out. But in the meantime, check out this video to see how I make my flags, and I'll see you guys over there.